Now, let me introduce the educational effects that can be expected when we bring special education together with a 4D frame. First, with the usage of semi-concrete objects, 4D frame helps students with intellectual disabilities to learn. Students with intellectual disabilities learn through concrete or semi-concrete objects, since they often face difficulties when learning through abstract concepts. 4D frame is a useful tool to utilize in such learning programs with semi-concrete objects. It can be used as a primitive counting stick, or it can also be used for counting plays by building favorite objects as well. Furthermore, students can also advance to questions like, how many parts and tubes do I need to build a car to count numbers, and go further to actual learnings such as building activities as well. Activities in multiple areas such as figure, science, architecture, technology, and music can help students with disabilities to gain interest in learning in terms of knowledge, emotion, and social interaction. Second, 4D frame helps in understanding the shapes and structures of objects. Students with disabilities find it difficult to understand the shapes and structures of objects due to their challenges in terms of cognitive and sensorial difficulties. Especially, students with blindness may find it challenging to recognize three-dimensional spaces, such as a solid figure. However, when they experience a structure that has an open inner and outer space, this may greatly help understand the figures. Additionally, it is very important to figure out the overall structure of a building when it comes to the real life of students with blindness. To do this, utilizing 4D frame and 4D block to let those students actually touch the structure and floor plans of a building will greatly help them to understand and recognize the space. Third, 4D frame helps in developing fine and gross motor skills. Educational activities with 4D frame help not only intellectual capacity but also the physical capacity for students with disabilities. Students with disabilities tend to have weaker motor skills, starting from simple connecting and cutting activities to building complex structures with fingers. 4D frame encourages the use of small muscles in various ways. So for 4D frame enables the use of large muscles as well. If teachers provide personalized learning activities based on the students' hand control abilities, the program can enhance their fine and gross motor skills. Next, let me tell you about 4D frame class teaching methods considering the characteristics of disabilities. The disability characteristics discussed in this part are mainly regarding the ones associated with intellectual disabilities or emotional disorders. First, they have difficulties with selective attention. When multiple factors are suggested at once, students having difficulties with selective attention struggle to choose where to focus on first and to understand the consecutive procedures. Therefore, when utilizing 4D frame in classes for these students, teachers should suggest only materials that are required in the respective stage of assembly, rather than introduce all the materials at once. Second, they have difficulties with attention maintenance. Thus, I suggest that teachers should give linguistic and physical feedbacks and use tools such as time timer to maintain the attention of students. Unlike other timers, time timer lets the students visually recognize the time given for a certain task. Thus, making students focus more on the given task. Time timer is now available on smartphone apps as well, making it easier to utilize. Third, they have difficulties with short memories. Let's take an example of reading the article in a textbook 3 times. If a student has intellectual disabilities or emotional disorders, they might find it difficult to store and withdraw the number they have read due to the challenge in short-term memories. In this case, put 3 40-frame tubes on the left side, then instruct them to put one of the tubes into the box on the right every time they read the whole text. With this method, the assigned tasks and 40-frame tubes become corresponding to each other, relieving the difficulties result from short-term memories. First, they have learned helplessness. Students with disabilities have learned helplessness because of repeated failures they have experienced. This is related to the lack of success experiences. Thus, when utilizing a 40-frame, it is recommended to adjust the difficulty of tasks in order to allow them to have more success experiences. This will not only help students with disabilities to overcome the learned helplessness, but also enhance the self-determination, which is usually a challenge for them. Additionally, I suggest teachers use the backward chaining strategy. Chaining means to teach a complicated action by dividing it into multiple steps, and backward chaining means to start from the very last step to teach something. So let's say we apply the backward chaining strategy to a 40-frame class where the learning objective is making a board. In this case, the teacher gives help on everything, but at the very last step, the teacher should let the students complete on their own. With this process, students can gain successes experience by immediately recognizing the result, which leads them to have further interest and motivation on the ongoing tasks. Lastly, I would like to explain the usefulness of the 40-frame to inclusive education and vocational education. First, 40-frame can be used on inclusive education. Inclusive education has a very important value, and it is the goal of special education. An inclusive society where various people get along well should start from school classes. 40-frame is a very useful tool to promote cooperation among students with and without disabilities. When making a result with 40-frame, there are various difficulties depending on the types of the designs, from a simple and compact object to very complex and large designs. When a teacher gives group tasks to the students, an adequate level of assignment should be given to students with disabilities to encourage them to participate in the project. This will make 40-frame a useful tool to close the learning gap and to move one step further to the inclusive education. Second, 40-frame can be used in vocational education. Vocational education is very important for students with disabilities to help them live within a society. The value of vocational education with a 40-frame is already recognized in the field of special education. 40-frame that has the diversity, safeness, cost-effectiveness, and educational value can be great tools for students with disabilities to help them learn and train vocational procedures. Distinguishing 40-frame materials and completing their packaging processes will enhance the vocational abilities of students with disabilities. In addition to what I have already said, there will be more various cases of utilizing 4D frame in the field of special education. However, if a teacher does not consider the different learning situations and personalities of students with disabilities, 4D frame might be considered as boring and difficult materials. But 4D frame has great potential to become a fascinating tool when teachers consider the characteristics of the materials and students with disabilities, especially in the field of special education.